Hi, so we're going to talk about using custom store procedures within IronSpeed. Today I'm using IronSpeed 10.02 in VB and with SQL Server 2008 R2. Of course you can use C# and other versions of SQL to suit, but we just thought we'd start with the simple one and show you how we can create a simple page with a simple grid and some simple data. Obviously you can extend on that later and add your own levels of functionality as required. So where do we start? Well, there's several pieces to the puzzle. The first one is we need to create or have available our data, which we do in SQL Server. We then need to write the store procedure to call that and extract that information, and what we're going to do is we're going to pass in a parameter that tells us to pick a particular country or all countries. So let's go and look at the data and see what that looks like. So within SQL Server, as I say, we've got a country table, and as you can see I've got a list of countries and some additional information, 242. And if I just show you the information in there, there it is. If I show you now the store procedure that we're going to create, you see it's very simple. I can either pass in, sorry, that's the test, there we go. This is the store procedure. We can either pass in a blank or we can pass in a name to select individual countries. So blank will select all and an individual one. Let's test that now, and if we go to my little test script here, if I pass in a particular name of a country and execute, sorry, let's just run that again, here we go, we can see we've got Angola. If I were to leave that blank, i.e. pass in an empty string, we would get all records back. So we know the store procedure works, very simple. Now we're going to plug that into IronSpeed. So let's get rid of the SQL for a second and bring up IronSpeed. Here we go. Let me just run this and show you. This is a very simplistic IronSpeed created wizard that we use to create the page, and the page is using IronSpeed grids, as you probably all hopefully have used in the past to create your basic page. We obviously want to use the same data source but add our own grid and functionality. So we're not going to use the IronSpeed grid, we want to do our own thing. So where do we start? Well, within IronSpeed I'm going to create within the country type, because that's the one we're going to do the select on, my own page. So let's just create a very simple my SP, for example, call it what you like, it doesn't really matter, and that gives us a blank page. Now what I need to do is to put onto the page a couple of controls that are not found in the normal IronSpeed toolbox, but they are part of the additional controls found in ASPX and other controls. Okay, so we're going to perform or we're going to use a grid and a drop down list. Now there's two ways we can do it. We can either drag and drop the drop down list like this, okay, or we can cut and paste information. So I'm going to do the cut and paste because I've already created this information. In fact, here's one I created earlier. So I've got two items. As you can see, we've got a bit of code there, ASPX code, so I'm just going to copy that and I'm going to paste it into my new one, okay, into the cell, and when I click off, there's my country. As we can see on the right hand side, it's a drop down list, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to get my grid, do the same thing. I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste into a new cell this time, and click OK. So now I've got the two pieces, the two components, the two controls on my page. Okay, and as you can see with the drop down list, I've given it an ID, okay, and its auto post back is true. That's important because when I change the drop down, I want the grid to change the filter settings. The grid itself is a standard ASPX grid view with a sort of an event for when the index changes. And a bit of styling, very simple, very basic. So this is what it looks like on the page, but of course I need some code behind to drive it. Okay, before I can do that I need to just compile it and build it. Okay, so now we've got the basics, and if we look over to the left we can see we've got some code behind. Now in that code behind I need to put my code behind, and I can only put it in section 1. It's no good me putting it into section 2, which is down below. This is not to be modified. Okay, so my code must go in section 1. Again, I've pre-written the code so we don't have to type it in again, and I'll take you through each line of that. So let me just copy that from over here, and we're going to paste that in to here. Okay. Now, as you can see, if we scroll back up slightly, I'm doing this completely within IronSpeed. I could, of course, and it's preferable if you've got Visual Studio to use Visual Studio, because then you can make use of the superior editing and debugging tools. But essentially what I've done is created a region with my code in, okay, and that code is only 50 odd lines long. It's not a lot. So the first routine is going to load the drop down list, and that will load in all of the countries from my table so that I can choose one of those from the drop down to filter the grid underneath. So that's the first bit of code that needs to be written. The second piece of code is the selected index change, i.e. when you change one of the entries in the drop-down list, you want to fire off the load grid control to reload the grid, and that's what this line here does. Obviously, the actual loading of the data from the grid is here, okay, and that effectively does a rebind and then calls my store procedure, as you can see here, which we'll cover in a second. So the data source is the return set from the store procedure. It's just a record set, nothing special about it. The next routine is the page index changed. So when we move through the pages on the grid, we expect an event to fire so that we can reload data and move to the next page. Okay, the next bit then, really the last bit of our code customizations required, is the store procedure call. Okay, and this is the bit that we're really interested. This is the bit that will populate the grid. Okay, so as you can see, it returns a data set, and it's the data set that gets bound to the grid. And what we're doing essentially is to call the store procedure, okay, and we're going to pass in a parameter, and that parameter is going to be a country. If you remember back to the store procedure in SQL, it had one parameter, and that was the country. Okay, so we're just setting up some basic parameters here, and then we pass in those parameters into the call. Okay, you need to pass in the name of the connection from the web config, the name of the store procedure, and your parameters. You then run the query, and that will return, hopefully if everything works, the data set, or nothing if it failed. Okay, so once the code's in here, we need to build our application and test it. So I'm going to go back into my page view. I want to save that. Let's do a build. Okay, and then if we run that now, in fact, let's make our page the default page. Okay, so when we run it, we should get the page, and we should have a couple of controls on the page, one being the drop down, one being the grid. Okay, pick a Albania, and now you can see the grid has populated with just that one row of information on a fairly basic looking grid, but it's just to prove the point that we can. Obviously you can style it later. Let's go and pick another country. There we go, it refreshes automatically, and let's go, if we go please select, i.e. nothing, then we expect the grid to show all countries. Let's see if that works, and there we go. Of course it's paginated, so as we move through each page, depending on the content, there we go, we've got a paginating grid. So that shows you how easy it is to create information outside of IronSpeed, but use it within IronSpeed. This course could be anything. This could be an information on a chart, could be we've done it on a grid, could be a report or whatever. So we pulled the information in, bound it to our control, and away we go, all within IronSpeed. Well, I hope you enjoyed that and found that useful. My name's Tim Titchmarsh from .NET Architect, based in the UK. If we can help you, please give us a call or email me at timt@netarchitect.co.uk. we'd be happy to help. Many thanks for listening.